12 weeks today, I line up for my 12th marathon and I'm aiming to fix my past mistakes and hopefully run my fastest marathon to date. There are some things in the past that have gone horribly wrong and some things that were avoidable. So for those elements, I've already been working hard on addressing them. So let's get into what those are. And fueling is the first mistake I have been making for such a long period of time. For the first 7 or 8 marathons, I was just under fueling massively, just really struggling to take on fuel in general. I discovered a variety of different brands and I started testing those, and in London Marathon 2022 I embarked on a challenge with SIS Beta Fuel, as in my own challenge, not with them, to see how many of those I could sink. I managed 2. Of course, those gels have 40 grams of carbs in, I think, so I managed to get 80 grams of carbs on board in the first hour and 20 minutes. After that, I felt violently sick, couldn't take another one on, and as you can imagine, that marathon nosedived. I then homed in on the Morton products and had some decent success with them, running my fastest marathon at PB to date, which is 2:40 and 48 seconds, I think it is. But once again, like the SIS, I could only stomach a certain amount of them. I could take 4 during the run, and those have 25 grams of carbs in each. So again, I was only taking on 100 grams during the race. And as you can imagine, things didn't finish well. Although I will say, and we'll come to it on point number 2, my best marathon was taking a gel 10 minutes before and then for Morton during the race. I just couldn't quite sink that 5th one. I was sick, and subsequently in London Marathon 2024, was it, or 23, I can't remember, whichever one it was, I was also sick out on the course at mile 22 and had that horrible death march into the finish past Big Ben. That was the moment I knew I had to give up on Morton products. They were okay for the short distance and for having before a race and just sinking a few, but I just could not stomach enough to get the calories on board. And as a bigger runner, I know the 60 to 80 grams of carbs per hour is even soft for me. I need to be taking on more than that, and that's exactly what I've been working on. So this is the first mistake I've fixed, and I've managed to do that with Precision Fuel and Hydration gels. I spent the first half of the year testing a lot of different types of gels, had some good success with some, not so much with others. But with the Precision gels, they just clicked. They're 30 grams of carbs per gel, and I've finally been able to sink 5 gels on a run within a 2-hour window. So I'm actually now getting on more carbs, 150 grams, in a long run that I'm not even going anywhere near the marathon distance, feeling good, feeling really great, and it is massively helping. And there's definitely scope to continue to take in on more, and that is exactly what I'm going to continue doing, because I don't want to settle for the 60 grams of carbs per hour. I definitely want to be aiming for that 80 or 90 mark. And ultimately what I'm aiming for is to leave the underfueling in the past. I'm really hoping that as of this marathon coming up in October, this is the start of something where I'm finally going to be able to fuel my body correctly. I'm not just settling for gels every 20 minutes, because that's what I'm doing right now in training. 20, 40, 60, 80, 100 minutes, and I'm getting to 2 hours feeling absolutely on top of the world. I would love to try and squeeze that down to every 5k, which for me at my pace, or what I'm aiming to do, is going to be around 18 to 19 minutes, so maybe just a smidge quicker, and see over the marathon if I can get another extra gel in as well. And the second thing, which still relates to fueling, but again it's the way I have been fueling, is I've really not ever been front loading the fueling. And what that means is I've not been putting a lot in my system early doors. So I never really used to take too much consideration as to how many carbs I was having in the carb load. I would just eat a lot leading up to the race, and I've had some good success. I've found what works, and I found what really helps going into the race. I feel like I'm sorted there. My most successful marathon is having a good normal breakfast that I usually have, and then having a gel 10 minutes before the race, and then starting my fueling relatively early. Newport was the one where I ran the 2:40, and that's where I had a gel 10 minutes before and then a gel every 25 minutes thereafter. And that's what I'll be making sure I do as well. In this one, once again, having a gel 10 minutes before and then starting fueling every 5k or 20 minutes, wherever I feel I'm comfortable at, and getting that fuel on board. What that actually meant was that in Newport, by 20 miles, that's the first time that I was still smiling from ear to ear, feeling really good. And it wasn't until mile 23 I started to fall off the wagon. I still to this day have not had a race where I've got to mile 20 feeling as good as I did because I front loaded the fueling. Now what that effectively means for you guys and for me is I hear a lot of people saying I'm going to have a gel around 40-45 minutes and try and have one there and then. I totally understand that, but ultimately towards the end of the race, you're going to have maybe a bit of flavour fatigue, or you're just going to not be able to take on board the fuel that you want to. And so by getting as much in as you can at the start, and I've talked to a lot of elite athletes about this and a lot of people that have run much faster marathons than me, the common theme it all comes down to is being able to fuel regularly and also being able to get as much on board early doors as you can before your heart rate gets up too high and before your stomach starts to turn towards the end of the race. So that's another mistake I'm going to be fixing. And number 3, I failed in the past massively sometimes to get those long run distances up early in the block, and when I have, I've not ever particularly structured them well enough to carry me through to race day. I've done it well a couple of times, and the difference it makes on race day, even if I do underfuel, for the leg strength and how my legs actually feel, is absolutely magic. But in particular, my last block, I had a stinking first half of training, and then I just tried to cram and rush everything in the final 7 to 8 weeks. And although it worked really well and I got myself into shape, it was just way too risky. I shouldn't really have done it, and it's not something that I want to repeat again. So I want to aim to get a steady and gradual and gentle build of those long runs up to that 2 hour, and then to that 20-mile mark, and then beyond there as early as I can, just so that my legs can start to get used to it. In those couple of marathons where I have had success with my long runs and doing them in a really strategic and well-built fashion, I often find that towards the end of the race, I just get no leg cramps, no twitches, nothing seems to signal that my legs are going to fail on me. And of course, lifetime miles comes in here, and I talk about this a lot on the channel, especially when I'm doing tip videos. I talk about lifetime miles, stacking up marathon blocks. It really does help. But I have had more recent marathons where I have had twinges of cramp and actually cramped. Sometimes it happens, but I find on the occasions when I've done the training blocks with the really good solid big long runs, it just never even comes into the equation, and it always ends up being underfueling, which is my undoing, rather than anything to do with leg fatigue or just my legs in general failing on me. So getting those long runs up early, and of course a gentle and steady build throughout the block, is going to be key. Number 4 is going to be sorting out my hydration as well. This is another thing like fueling where I just completely neglected it. In the first 6-7 marathons, I just never used to drink at all, because I used to get stomach cramps and I used to dread putting fluid into my body. Even on those hot marathons, I knew that the second I did that, my stomach would just start cramping. I couldn't take on any more fuel, and it was an absolute nightmare. I spent so long trying to work out what that was, and the second that I started focusing on strength and conditioning and doing a lot of core work and really strengthening in and around that core area, they completely disappeared. So after talking to a few people and explaining this to them, the only thing that we can kind of logically think about is potentially my diaphragm was just compressing because I was folding in the middle because my posture was so bad. Everything was just locking up and cramping, and it was an absolute nightmare. But since focusing on that and continuing with regular core work, it has been completely non-existent, which is great. However, I still have never addressed the hydration issue fully. I do aim to drink in as many water stations as possible, but I don't ever particularly take on a lot. And so by addressing that, what I'm doing right now with my long runs is taking a flip belt out with me and a soft flask, and I'm making sure I take on 250 to 300 ml of fluid throughout those long runs. Again, it's still not enough, but it's far more than I would have taken on during a marathon. And again, I'm just trying to get my stomach used to taking on more gels, which I'm having good success with, plus taking on the hydration at the same time. And again, I am just finishing these long runs that I'm doing right now feeling on cloud 9. It's like nothing I have ever felt before. Would you believe it? Number 5, pacing and being a little bit more aggressive with it. I must be honest with you, and it's kind of like opening a bit of a can of worms here because it's all up in here. But after the 7th and 8th marathon, where I really was just failing time after time, and although I was failing better and dedicated to trying to work harder, I was still not getting the results that I was wanting. And so what tended to happen then, especially in the more recent marathons, is I've just backed off a little bit from where I think I should be and just aimed to run a lot more conservative. That led to the lowest heart rate I had ever registered during a marathon last year when I ran a 2:44. Yes, the weather wasn't fantastic, but I still registered 156 beats a minute across the whole marathon. Now for some perspective here, when I ran my 240, I stayed in the 150s for maybe 3 or 4 miles, sat in the low 160s for a good 10 to 12 miles, and it wasn't until around about mile 15, 16 where I tipped into that 164, 165 round, which is where my threshold is, and then I had the final 10 miles after that to kind of hang on as best as I can. And it worked really well. That was an aggressive pacing strategy. I believed in myself and I really went for it. But since then, I have just lost all confidence to really go out and attack a marathon. To be fair, I've been quite conservative with my goals here on YouTube, just basically saying I want to go out and I want to run strong. And that is ultimately what I always want to do, go out there and have a good race. But I'm going to try and shake that mentality up a little bit and have a bit more confidence in myself. Now, of course, that's going to depend on how the training block goes, but I'm feeling confident at this stage that I'm going to go out there and be a little bit more aggressive in my strategy and kind of go for where I feel my fitness is at, rather than just holding back a little bit and putting the brakes on. Number 6, I'm trying to work on a couple of extra 1%ers, the things that can make a big difference over a longer distance race, but might not necessarily make the huge difference week in, week out. Now, over last winter, I did a lot of overdressing in my long runs, a bit of heat training, and I went to Alicante, ran in 18 to 20 degree heat, and probably ran one of my best races in heat that I have ever run. I finished really well, and it wasn't until the last couple of miles that I really struggled, but running a half marathon from the British cold weather straight into that temperature, I really thought I was going to flake out, and I didn't, and it was so good. And so I've carried that on throughout this year, mainly in the form of taking hot baths 2 or 3 times a week, and I just have not let up with that. I just do it every single week, and I have adapted to this summer heat that we've had here in the UK really well, to the point where my heart rate is now some of the lowest that I've ever seen for really quick paces. So I'm really excited about that. And that's just a 1%er that I'm not prepared to give up in the build up to Abingdon. It's just going to make the world of difference, I know, when the temperatures do drop in September or October, and I'm just going to feel like my lungs open up. We all feel like that when the temperatures drop, and that's of course when we go and attack those PBs. But working on that heat training, as well as continuing with my regular strength and conditioning, which is of course basically core work and upper body work to focus on the posture, and of course my training, logging some decent miles, those things combined with the added heat training is something that I'm going to be continuing with. And the final thing I want to share is really laying down a strong foundation. This is something and a mistake that I used to make all the time, because I used to bounce from one training block to another and really never dedicate the time to laying down what I needed to be able to layer on top the marathon training that's to come. The first time I really dedicated some time to it was last year, and the success I had in the build-up when I finally did get my training right in the second half of the block was absolutely outstanding, and I did go into the race feeling the fittest I ever had, and I was so grateful for that fitness. And of course that carried on into the winter and then into the early part of this year, where I've smashed a lot of PBs, and I'm so grateful for that. And I attribute a lot of that to laying down some good foundations last summer. So that's exactly what I've been doing over the last 8 to 9 weeks, logging some of the highest miles that I've ever run, trying to string back-to-back 75-mile weeks, which again is pushing my limits because I normally sit around 55 to 65. And again, that coupled with the type of training, which is very threshold based, has been absolutely fantastic. I've got a down week coming up in a couple of weeks, and then once I get back from there, I'm going to be really launching in to some marathon specific work. So I'm really hoping overall that by laying down a good foundation, working on those 1%ers, and then of course really nailing the fueling and hydration, spending an absolute fortune on these products, I'm hoping that all of these things that I've listed are going to lead to a really positive result in October. Obviously there are some things that we can't control on the day, and if they happen like the weather again, then so be it. But if I get myself into the best shape possible, then that's all I can do. And I'm a firm believer in not just giving up if that race doesn't go to plan, because I know the fitness that I build here and what you guys are building throughout the summer will translate into some faster races after your goal autumn race, and you'll be able to carry that through into the winter and into next year as well. I'd love to hear from you guys what the biggest mistakes you've made in your previous marathon builds are. and how you've gone about rectifying them, please do drop a comment. It'd be great to hear from you down there. And speaking of fueling, there is a link in the description for X Miles. It is an affiliate link. I do earn a small commission. It doesn't cost you any extra, but of course it's where I buy all of my gels from using the discount code provided. So as I said, I've probably spent in excess of £200-300 already. If you're looking to get some fueling products or anything running related, do check out that link down there. New customers get a 10% discount, and of course there are some other links in the description: Coros and sports shoes for your shoes, and a couple of others as well. So that's it from me today, guys. If you enjoyed hearing about these mistakes and how I plan to rectify them, check out this video up here of my recent training. This is how my weeks are currently structured. Or if you want to see how last year's Abingdon Marathon went, check out this video down here with that storm. What a nightmare. I'm trying not to revisit it myself because it might trigger some bad memories, but do go and check that one out, and I'll see you guys on one of those.